next Saturday. Christmas comes early.
Unbelievable! Welcome to this incredible scene.
Bills.
To the end zone!
Chargers.
It's a touchdown!
An exclusive NFL game.
That's fantastic!
Live in primetime.
Wow!
Only on Peacock.
With a Christmas gift to their fans. They're having some fun now.
Bills versus Chargers. Next Saturday, 7:30 Eastern. Exclusively on Peacock.
What I love most about Mi Gente is our community and how important it is to take care of our own.
Hey, it's Honey and Carolina. On our podcast, Life in Spanglish, we talk about how important being there for your loved ones is.
Pero también sobre lo importante que es tener a alguien dispuesto a apoyarte cuando lo necesites, como lo hace State Farm.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Aprende más en es.statefarm.com.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
In the early hours of Sunday, the 29th of May, legendary jockey Lester Piggott passed away, aged 86, in Switzerland. In today's podcast, I'm joined by Sean Magee, eminent racing historian and author of Lester's Derbies, who interviewed Lester on many occasions during his career. Welcome back to the podcast, Sean. Very sad news for the sport of horse racing and for the world of sport.
Yes, thank you. Great to be back with you. I was very sad to hear of Lester's passing. We got on so well for so many years. It wasn't always easy, but we had a lot of fun as well as business arrangements. So, still sad and likely to remain so for good. He was an extraordinary man. In some ways, he was one of the most unusual people I'd ever met. And you just had to live with that side of him that you never quite sure when you were going to see him, whether you're going to get the ultra taciturn or the jokey or the storyteller, all sorts of things. And they came together in this extraordinary fellow. Plus, of course, he had sublime skills, supreme skills as a jockey. We miss seeing him so many ways. But having said which, since the weekend when we heard about this, then the level of coverage in the press and so on has been tremendous. And however many more times, we can never have enough of Royal Academy winning the Breeders' Cup Mile in 1990. And so there's been an interesting side to this. Let's put it like that.
Well, thanks for that introduction. What made him such a great jockey?
Well, I think he certainly was a great jockey. He's the only one that comes remotely close, really, is Gordon Richards. And it's interesting, of course, Gordon Richards had a very loose sort of style and a very upright sort of style, whereas Lester had this, the opposite, really. He was often asked, because of the way he held himself when at the gallop, it's often been said to him, well, why do you stick your bottom in the air? And he said, well, I've got to put it somewhere. That is, I won't try to do an impression of Lester every time I quote him, but and I read somewhere the other day one of these pieces about him. He had a remarkable rapport with horses, and this person, I can't remember who it was now, was writing the other day and said that horses really responded to him because he was very quiet. He was always quiet. I mean, quiet in all sorts of ways. And the horses liked the quiet of him. And I don't know whether this can be proved, but it's an interesting notion. And the fact is that with all his other traits, this ability to get into the brain, if you like, the mind, the spirit, really, of individual horses was just unrivaled. And very, very unusual. There are great jockeys, and then there's Lester. for me, he's completely out on his own as the best. Of course, he wasn't the actual statistical leader of jockeys, Gordon Richards and then Pat Edery and then Lester. But as a man who really had horses really respond to him, I think he was unparalleled.
I also spoke to Lester's lifelong friend, Frank Conlon, head man and work rider at Henry Cecil's Warren Place stables. I asked Frank what made Lester such a great jockey and what he was like to work with at Warren Place in the early 1980s.
Everything. His balance, his strength, mainly his brain. He was a fortnight in front of everybody else, literally. He knew everything, he knew every horse in the race before he rode against them. And it was just his sheer ability. Took chances where other people wouldn't. He'd go through gaps that weren't even there, Piggott, and he got into a lot of trouble. But he'd always looked dangerous, but it never was. He used to know when to go and when not to go. You knew you'd always got him on your side, especially when he was in a race, you know. You'd sooner have him riding for you than against you. That was the simple thing about it. And very clever, and when he come back, he could always tell you everything about the horse, you know. Sometimes you think Lester had won so easy, just coasting along, and he would say to me, actually, there was nothing left in the tank. That was it. You know, you think he could have gone on farther, but he'd just say he couldn't. And he always told the truth, always, you know. He was just a genius to work with completely. Absolutely. Never took any orders. If Henry asked him to lead, he'd say, you lead, I'll sit second. He used to want to do his own thing, and that was it. But Henry used to accept it, you know. He don't tell me how to train, I ain't going to tell him how to ride. It's as simple as that, you know. So that's the Lester. But to have him round and you knew you got him on your side was always ace. Absolutely genius.
Well, we're going to talk separately about his derbies, but his career was, well, the career longevity is amazing to think that he rode his first winner at the age of 12. He was still racing at the age of 59 and winning the Derby in 4 different decades. I always think the 2,000 Guineas record of winning that in 5 different decades, it's just unbelievable, really.
Yeah. It's interesting, of course, when starting at 12, which is quite extraordinary, and of course it couldn't happen nowadays. There are regulations to stop that sort of longevity, the youth, the infancy, if you like, of the would-be jockeys. But and another interesting thing which is not appreciated is that having got that first winner in August 1948 on the Chase, it took him quite a long time to get his next couple of winners, because of course he was still at school there very reluctantly. He didn't have much time for school. But it wasn't a meteoric fame. It was more gradual than some people remember. The other interesting thing, which not a lot of people notice, is that the day of his first winner, as I just said, August 1948, was the same day that Don Bradman, the great Australian cricketer, played his last day's cricket. Test cricket, that is, and it was like the obvious sort of parallel. It is the old hero leaving the stage just as the new one comes along from the other side, and that sort of thing. So that was interesting. And the other aspect of Lester in this context, Peter O'Sullivan, who was his great mate, the commentator, he wrote a piece about Lester in which he said that Lester had been deprived of his childhood, and because by the time he was 12, he was regularly riding, and that was interesting, as well as, you know, whether he was Lester was very internalized, sort of, that's the right word, sort of person, and therefore he was happy with his own company. He preferred his own company to the company of pretty well anybody else. Just my theory.
I've not heard that fact about Don Bradman, but that really is two of the most iconic sportsmen of the 20th century, connected in that way. And especially for this podcast, as we focus on cricket and horse racing. But talking about talking, I'm now going to ask an interviewer about what it was like to interview Lester Piggott. Can you remember the first time you interviewed him, and how did that come about?
As I remember, I was put on to Lester, or rather he was put on to me, because he had written an autobiography for quite a lot of money. The publisher had paid in advance. And what they drafted a version of this, and it completely lacked emotion. It hardly had any sort of feeling in it at all. It was just, then I wrote so and so, and then I wrote Carrozza, and then I wrote blah, blah, blah. And the publisher was very unhappy about this, and said to Lester he had to beef it up a bit, or they'd remove themselves from the agreement. And Lester said to Peter O'Sullivan, well, what am I going to do? And Mo Sullivan, who I worked on a couple of book projects with, suggested that he get in touch with me, Lester. So I went up to Newmarket and had one of these, the first of many very sort of minimal conversation. And we hadn't really got an awful long way. And I said to him, let's just try an experiment of me ghosting you. And let's talk about Nijinsky. And he lit a cigar and sipped a glass of champagne, which was his basic diet, as you will remember. And he said, well, it was impossible not to fall in love with Nijinsky the second you saw him. I thought this was a pretty good line to start with from somebody who was famous for being non-communicative. And so we talked completely off the cuff about Nijinsky, and I thought, no, there's something here, because he does have an emotional side. He just doesn't show it very often. And so we agreed that I would help him by going back to the text, the non-emotional text, and help out. And that's what, over a period of some months, that's what we did. And then gradually, he's not an easy person to be trustful. He didn't trust people in the way that other people might. And so it took a while for me to become, him to become relaxed in my company, if you like. And he stopped being suspicious of me. But anyway, they published the book eventually, and all was well. And then I had the idea for a book about Leicester's derbies, which became Leicester's derbies. And the point being that I would have one level of writing, if you like, that would be me writing about the facts and sort of documents, and him giving his version of things. And so that was quite fun. And we just got more and more relaxed, I think is probably the word. Sometimes he would occasionally, if he was doing a promotional video or something like that, he would often specifically ask for me to be the questioner, because he knew exactly what he was going to get from me, which is the same level of question that I was doing the last time. I mean, there was the business, of course, of the speech impediment and the deafness, which were a problem in some ways. Occasionally, he would say something which you just couldn't understand, and I would say, just try and try again. Other people were fairly wary of him, because you would finish an interview with Lester and you'd look at your notebook and it would appear there's nothing that would stick. And it was strange, I think, because there was nobody like him, and that sort of, the muttering, murmuring sort of accent he could turn on. But we got, as I say, over a period of years, we got much more relaxed, and it became much easier for me to hear what he was saying and so forth. So, we had a special relationship in that sense. But
I heard myself you interview him for Crapello's 60th anniversary win of the 2000 Guineas. That was at the National Horse Racing Museum when Julie Cecil was there that evening as well.
That's right. That was, and then more recently, I did a virtual sort of interview with him for the Jockey Club, for a promotional thing, and he's even more cack-handed technologically than I am, I think, because he would be he was sort of halfway on the screen. God knows where the other half of him had gone. But he was fine. Once he got to the right position, he was fine, because he knew, as I say, he knew what the questions were going to be, and he knew what his answers were going to be. So it was just a matter of half an hour, 20 minutes.
Leicester's Derbies came out 50 years after Never Say Die's. That was his first victory in 1954. The book came out in 2004. What did he consider his best Derby winner?
Well, there's the sort of blanket line about all the 9 winners were great on the day, which is a sort of giveaway. I mean, it's between Nijinsky and Saraiva, and sometimes he would say one, and sometimes he would say another. But to me, the Saraiva was just astonishing, the turn of foot he showed, that horse. And although Nijinsky was a great horse for sure, it wasn't sort of quite as spectacular. The thing about Saraiva, of course, he was considered a doubtful stayer over a mile and a half. He just Lester waited. And come the moment, he just whooshed by from Connaught. I've always thought the Minstrels was remarkable. Just the way he got up very close home, beat Hotgrove and neck. And then, of course, there was Roberto, who, after all sorts of shenanigans before the race about who was going to ride what horse, Lester got Roberto by a short head, which was the narrowest margin of any of his 9 winners, Derby winners. They were all different. It was like a sort of masterclass. If you look at them now, there are plenty of videos available about the 9 of the 9.
9 winners out of 36.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That's nice round numbers.
So he first rode in the race in 1951, last time in 1994. And as we spoke before, in 1953, he rode a horse called Prince Charlemagne, who the following March, the same year as his Derby win on Never Say Die, won the Triumph Hurdle at Hurst Park. Not many jockeys can do that. No. And again, thinking of strike rates, his strike rate, I think he had 20 winners, didn't he, over hurdles, out of something like 54, 50-something. And he was mainly did it. In fact, he did it till up to 1959, I think, mainly to keep weight down, of course. But he was also, when he could arrange it, he loved going abroad to Far East, all sorts of other places. He loved travelling, and they loved him, of course. Well, it was fairly unusual for a jockey to go to Hong Kong or wherever, in the way that it is now. It's simple now. Those days, the first country he ever rode abroad was Greece, interestingly enough. I don't know how he arranged this, but it became part of the Piggott's psyche that he would love going overseas, and so therefore it was sort of fitting that he's
greatest moment, individual moment in the Royal Academy was in the USA.
Yeah, and that's a day that you were there at Belmont Park to watch the Breeders' Cup Mile in 1990 when he won this extraordinary race, which has been played many times over the last week. You weren't working there; you were there as a spectator.
Yeah, I was. I think I was working in publishing then, but it looked so good on paper that because Day Jure, you'll remember, brilliant sprinter, was running Royal Academy, some very good American trained horses. And I thought, in those days, you could get standby tickets on planes fairly easily. And so I just decided to go out, and I could stay with friends in Manhattan. So I could, it just felt to me as if it was going to be special. It was much more special than I expected it to be because of Piggott. And he was noticeably much more happy. He gave quite long interviews afterwards, including one with Gruff Scott for Channel 4 Racing, and in which Lester famously said, "You never forget." It's a good line. You've been through all this and been in prison and so on. You never forget. That's a good line. For a taciturn man, that's a pretty good line.
And it was a matter of days since he came back riding.
It was 12 days, I think. He came back on the Monday, and Belmont Park was on the Saturday. And as you say, it's been played a lot for his recent days. But he did it. He slipped coming round the final bend, and he used to say it felt like that he Royal Academy had put his foot in the hole. Anyway, so he was sort of knocked back a bit and then had to make it up. And they beat that horse. It's all Greek to me, and everybody was just amazed. And I can't put it simpler than that, really. I mean, it was just extraordinary. It was his age. There was his lack of his ring rustiness, you might say. And look what happened. Quite extraordinary. But it wouldn't be extraordinary without anybody else. But it's almost routine with Piggott.
And Royal Academy was a son of Nijinsky as well, which adds more to the almost boy's own story of this.
Yes, and they weren't sure whether he would stay because he was a very good sprinter. Royal Academy won the July Cup, 6 furlong. So the way he finished, and Lester sort of taking a cheeky look over his shoulder to check how far ahead he was. He wasn't very far ahead, but he won, and just amazing.
And of course, the comeback then extended further because in 1992 he won the 2,000 guineas on Rodrigo de Triano, his 30th classic. Also won the Juddmonte International that year and the Champion Stakes on the same horse.
I think Rodrigo de Triano hasn't got the credit he deserved. I mean, he was a very, very, when the conditions were right, he was a very, very good horse. And Lester always said, if he was being interviewed, Lester always said that he was much better than people, Rodrigo was much better than people remember. And that was the 30th classic, yes, in
1992.
Yeah. So that was one of the high points. He also had low points because he took a terrible fall in the US during his second coming, as it were. I don't think anybody thought he was quite as good as he was when he retired the first time, but it was still an amazing story. And the fact that he could win at the highest level, of course, was important. He wasn't just messing about around small tracks. He was winning, competing in and winning best races there were. He ran in the 1992 Derby, and interestingly, Piggott hardly put him in the race at all, because he knew instantly, or pretty well instantly, that the course wouldn't suit Rodrigo, and he just let him lob along in his own time. He was way, I can't remember if he was actually last, but he was way down. And that reminded me of his great, people, this time of year, people would always ask, what does it take, ask Lester, what does it take to win a derby? And the word he always used was balance, and that was interesting. That it's not, you don't want a big horse, because balance of the horse coming down Tattenham Hill, Tattenham Corner, you so easily get unbalanced, and then your chance is gone. And that pretty well all his winners, I think, were quite close up coming into Tattenham Corner, and he knew that this is where you had to be.
Well, this year's Platinum Jubilee Derby is being run in his memory, and back in 1979, he rode for the Queen. He rode Milford in the Derby.
Yes, that was remarkable, because the stable jockey with Dick Hearn was Willie Carson, and he had a choice between Troy and the second string, but still a pretty good horse, was Milford. And after a lot of speculation, it ended up with Lester riding Milford, and Milford was owned by the Queen. And this is you couldn't do better for a sort of Housewife's Choice sort of story. But he didn't. I think he was sort of mid-division, never looked like winning. Whereas Troy, as you'll remember, with this sort of barnstorming performance under Willie Carson. But it was the elements that came together in Milford, which was interesting, because you got the Piggott connection and you got the Royal connection. And his first classic, no, not his first classic, her first classic, Queen's first classic, was Carrozza in the 57 Oaks, who was ridden by
Lester Piggott.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of connections, and this is why it's sort of repeating with Milford, but it was not to be. And then, of course, much more recently, there was Carlton House in the Derby, finished third in the Royal colours, not ridden by Lester. He retired yet again by then.
As Ryan Moore.
Yeah, that's right. And a shoe came off in the final furlong, which didn't help.
Any final thoughts then about your great friend Lester Piggott?
Well, the main one is just gratitude, my gratitude for knowing him. I know it sounds sort of cliche in some ways, but he was such a remarkable man. He was remarkable in the saddle and not in the saddle. And when he was on form, he could be the most delightful company and funny and so on. And when he's not in the good frame of mind, he could be quite hard work, put it like that. And I know I would just be happy to have known him, and really sad for his departure.
And I think younger listeners won't realise how big a star jockeys like Lester Piggott, Lester in particular, at that time were, because horse racing was so much more in the news. The Derby was such a big event in the 50s, 60s, 70s, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. And racing had a much, much higher profile then than it does now, and 60s and 70s. And he would be a real superstar. You would go to a race meeting when I was little anyway, and in order to see this man in action, he was extraordinary. And he had the whole panoply of riding races. He could win by short head, and he could win by 15 lengths, and they were whichever of those it was, they were worth watching. He was just special. That's the answer. He's special, and will remain special.
Well, that's a very good way to end this podcast, to talk about the late, great Lester Piggott. And thank you very much for sharing your memories of someone you got to know well over many years.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to The Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts,
Amazon Music,
SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at The Pad and Pav. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
For Mervis Diamond Importers, I'm Ronnie Mervis. Nothing will flatter her more than Mervis Diamond ear studs. She'll wear them every day. It's the one essential she'll never take off. Mervis Diamond ear studs are classic. They're the ideal accessory. Our studs are brighter and flash more. That's my guarantee. It's the world-famous Mervis quality which creates that blaze of light. Mervis diamonds are so brilliant, it's rude not to stare. Mervis proudly shows the most diamond ear studs. We offer all sizes and prices. Starting at just $500 for gorgeous half carats, our unrivaled collection includes studs from modest to truly grand. The amazing thing is the Mervis value, which makes our diamond ear studs so affordable. For the rest of time, you can trade up your Mervis diamond ear studs for larger, and we'll apply the full purchase price. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Just bring your studs back whenever you're in the mood and keep moving up. All you pay is the difference. Mervis Diamond Importers. For diamond ear studs she can't live without. Financing is available. For stores, go to mervisdiamond.com. Again, that's mervisdiamond.com or call 1-800-HER-LOVE.